This next segment of the podcast, we are starting something special for season 8.
Yes.
We're calling it Villains of History.
Because not much rhymes with villain.
Yes.
In a positive way, so.
Yes. We tried chilling with villains.
But villains, we don't want to chill with them.
We don't want to chill with them.
No.
So we're going to highlight a villain from history every single week for this season. And at the end, we're going to see if we can take away anything as to how we can prevent a villain like that being born in the future or help ourselves not become that villain as well.
Perfect.
So, Christina, take it away.
All right. I'm going to start with a little story and see if you can figure out who this villain is. Which so far, all my ideas for villains are men. So we got to throw a lady villain in there somewhere. I don't know. Somewhere. Okay. In the dead of winter in early 1221, in the ancient oasis city of Merv, one of the greatest metropolises of the Islamic world and possibly the largest city on earth at the time, was attacked. Bitter cold howled across the plains, whipping up a cloud of fine dust. Inside Merv, the air was thick with fear. The once thriving center of trade, scholarship, and gardens, home to hundreds of thousands of souls, now braced for the coming storm. A wicked man had unleashed his forces on the Mongol Empire after its ruler had executed one of his trade ambassadors. City after city had already fallen to this terror. Now, under the direct command of his son, Toli, the Mongol army, tens of thousands strong, encircled the city of Merv. The orders were clear: total submission or total annihilation. The city's leaders, hoping to spare their people, chose surrender. They opened the gates and didn't try and fight back. But what followed was not mercy, but calculated horror orchestrated in this wicked man's name. The entire population, men, women, and children, were herded out into the open plains out of the city walls. For 4 agonizing days, they were herded in streams out into the desert. Mongol warriors, mounted on horses, drove them out. The wicked man positioned himself on a golden throne to watch the spectacle unfold, a chilling symbol of his absolute power. Skilled artists and engineers, about 400, and a handful of young children were pulled aside from the crowd and spared for enslavement. The rest faced systemic execution. Each Mongol soldier was reportedly assigned with a quota, at least 400 victims to kill personally. Swords flashed as families were torn apart, the air filled with screams, the metallic scent of blood, and the cries of the dying echoed across the frost-hardened ground. By nightfall on that day, the plain was said to be soaked in blood, with mountains of corpses rising in the hills. Ancient accounts put the death toll at in between 700 to 1.3 million. 700,000 to 1.3 million. When it was over, the city of Merv was looted, burned, and left in ruins. Its libraries and mosques were destroyed, its gardens were trampled. The once mighty city was reduced to desolation, a haunting warning that echoed across the empire. If you resist Genghis Khan, your world will be destroyed.
Wow. I guess it's Genghis Khan.
Yes. I should have had you guess. I put it in the last line. Yes, it was Genghis Khan.
Wow. I had no idea it was that many people.
Yes, he was an absolutely merciless person. Like, as the story told, the city leaders, so they had killed some of his tradesmen, because that was the whole Silk Road trade was really big in China, the East area. Mm-hmm. And they had taken out some of his people, and he's like, I don't care if you surrendered. I'm going to kill you all.
Jeez, oh man.
Children, mothers, didn't matter.
I might be misquoting Joe Rogan here, but I think he talked about Genghis Khan when he said that he killed so many people that it actually changed the carbon footprint of the world at that point in history.
I could see that being true when I get to later on how many people he ended up having killed.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Very interesting.
All right.
So, I was really fascinated with bad people, wicked people growing up. And I remember writing a paper on Genghis Khan when I was younger, but I found out so much more about him due to the wonders of the internet.
Yeah.
Easier to access than when I was 10.
Tell me some more.
So Genghis Khan was born His name was Temujin.
Oof.
Temujin.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to
I'd be a
refer to
murderer if
him
that was my
as
name.
Genghis throughout this.
Yeah.
So he was born in around 1162 in Mongolia, and he survived a traumatic childhood. His father was poisoned by a rival tribe. And Genghis, whose dad was the chief of the tribe, tried to get the tribe to accept him as the next leader. Like, my dad was killed, I'll be your next leader. But he was only 9 years old.
Oh.
And so the tribe's like, no, and kicked
Yeah.
him and his family out of the tribe to fend for themselves. So he was pretty much tribeless at a very young age, and his mom managed to keep him and his brothers and siblings alive. So did not start out great, but a lot of confidence.
Yeah. Lots of confidence.
At 9, like, I'll be the chieftain. They're like, nope, you're 9. So at 17 years old, he married a woman called Bort.
Bort. Nice.
And she ended up becoming far more than just a wife. She ended up being his like trusted advisor, administrator of kind of the armies, and political partner. And while Genghis was away on war campaigns, she would manage parts of his territory in the household. So she was kind of like the first lady kind of a situation.
That's cool.
Which was very rare back then for any woman to have any sort of like power. But it was kind of like, you better listen to Bort or else. And she was actually kidnapped by a rival tribe and held captive for 8 months. But Genghis and his men raided the tribe, took out the tribe, and rescued his wife.
Wow.
So through sheer will and strength, Genghis kind of developed his own tribe and brought other people in under his rule, even though he started out at a young age tribeless. And he just would take out his rivals ruthlessly, like killing them and their families and their children and their horses and the whole tribe and anybody they knew. So it's like, you better not offend him.
Wow.
He even killed his half-brother because he was worried that he was going to get too much power. So he ended up unifying the Mongol tribes over a period of 20 or 30 years because it was a very kind of how you think of indigenous people in North America. They were all in separate tribes. So it's kind of imagine somebody unifying them all together. And that was Genghis Khan. And in 1206, so hard to say these dates. I'm just not used to it.
That's all right.
At the age of 44, he was proclaimed the title Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler.
Wow.
Yeah.
Universal ruler.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Over the whole.
How old was he?
He was 44.
Dang.
Yeah. So in a period of just his father, was offed, and just 25, 35 years later, he was the ruler of all of Mongolia, brought all the tribes together, which was crazy. Over the years, he married 6 more women and had hundreds of concubines who came from tribes and cities that he conquered. So through that, they kind of suspect that the majority of like current Mongolian people today are like all descendants of Genghis Khan.
That's so wild.
In some way or fashion,
Yeah.
just because he had hundreds of children. He revolutionized warfare by creating a very disciplined, merit-based army where it was kind of like, if you're ruthless, then you rise to the top. So he just kind of collected a bunch of people who were just really vicious. And he really focused on archery from horseback. So that was one thing that his warriors, the military that he developed, were amazing at, was just riding in on these horses with bows and arrows and just taking whole tribes out. And psychological terror. Like, literally, people are like, oh my gosh, the army's coming. And people would just like freak out and kind of lose their minds and run away. So the militaries that other tribes or cities had kind of just crumbled.
Man.
Yeah. As we see in the story that I told earlier, that they're like, oh no, he's coming. Okay, we'll surrender. And that didn't help them either.
Yeah,
He's like, well, I'm
help.
just going to take you all out anyways. So his conquests over the 65 years he was alive ended up creating the largest connected empire in history, stretching from China to Central Asia and beyond. So like the Roman Empire was very large, but it was, a collection of different areas across the globe, where this was just like he took over a whole continent pretty much.
Gosh.
He promoted some of the things that he did that were positive. He promoted trade and trade routes and kind of in between countries, like, hey, I'll trade you these goods, you'll get them back. kind of good relations that way. He was also very tolerant towards other religions. He was into this odd religion I never heard of before, Tangrist. They believed in Tangri, the eternal blue sky, and the spirit of nature. So it was kind of a peace-loving religion. So because of that, he was very open to, I'll take over this city, but you can still be a Christian, and you can still be a Buddhist, and you can still be a Muslim. And if you're a priest, I won't make you be a warrior because you're not supposed to. So that was some things that people liked about him. And he also had this legal code that he developed called the Yasa, where it was kind of like, this is how we're good to people and how you're honest. But kind of like if you do something against him, just going to take you out.
Oh, totally.
And your goat and your family and everybody.
Yeah, not the goat. Oh.
So although he promoted this complete freedom of worship and like honoring people's religions and beliefs, that was the only part that like he cared about. Like, okay, I'll be good towards religious interests, but anything else, he just is going to take you out.
Strange.
You. Yeah.
Very strange.
Very odd dualism. He died in 1227 at the age of 65 during a campaign. And they don't know if it was from injury or illness. The way it was recorded just isn't very clear. And it might be to like preserve that like one of the greatest warriors got taken out kind of a thing.
Oh, for sure.
And his tomb remains hidden to this day.
No
They buried him in an unmarked
way.
tomb. That was his wishes. He didn't want people to know where he was buried.
Wow.
So he's lost to history. And in his lifetime, around 40 million people were killed.
40 million?
During his conquests.
Oh my God.
This number attributes to over 10% of the world's population at that time.
40 million.
Yes, because the world at that time had about 400 million people.
Oh my God.
So he took out, it's kind of like the Black Plague took out, like a quarter of the earth?
Yeah.
Well, a couple hundred years before, he took out a tenth of it just by his own warriors. Yeah.
Dang. That's insane.
Yes.
What can we learn from this?
So I was trying to look up, what can we learn from this? The number one thing that came up was that don't let any one person get too much power.
Yeah.
And
that
so
makes sense.
it was kind of this, he just gained traction and enough people were scared enough that they didn't take him out soon enough. So once you get that kind of, there's that tipping point where somebody gets enough power and it's really hard to reel that back.
Oh, yeah.
So don't let somebody get too much power. Another suggestion was to not develop an us versus them thinking where that other countries or religions or races are less than, that they're all people. Because that's obviously something that he's like, that tribe over there, there's not a value in their human lives. So I'm just going to take out even young children. And that's kind of what we can learn from it. I don't know what else.
No, that's great.
Do you have anything else that you would take away from that?
I mean, obviously, fatherlessness led to this kind of need to rule. He saw maybe an example of strength and power as a child in his father, and his father wasn't there anymore, and so he had to kind of compensate or overcompensate.
Yep.
And so I think that's a huge part of it. I was listening to a podcast the other day about the impact of not having a father versus having a father, and having a father is how children learn the rules of society.
Yes.
And so to not have a father means he didn't necessarily learn fully how society works, and so he made his own way.
Wow.
Which was my way or I'll kill you.
Yes.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing we can take away is like, hey, everybody needs a father, and if you see somebody without one, maybe think about stepping in and helping them out if you're, a man with a good relationship with that mom or whatever's happening. So I think that's what I could take away from it.
Wow. You stole my thunder of my conclusion.
Did I really?
I love it because that was my final takeaway. As I've been looking into different villains in history that we're going to go over, I just was like, oh, Genghis Khan's father was killed violently at 9, kind of kicked out of the community. So I started looking up Adolf Hitler's father was extremely abusive towards him. Stalin's father was an alcoholic and very abusive to him. Fidel Castro had a very strict, authoritarian, abusive father. Napoleon Bonaparte had a horrible father who then died when he was only 15. Saddam Hussein did not have a present father in his life,
Wow.
like over and over. I'm going to be very fascinated to see if by the end of the 10 people we go over, if any of them had fathers.
Well, there's a classic saying about superheroes, because most superhero stories start with the parents dying, or with a father figure dying. And it's either the hero learns to protect other people so that doesn't happen to them, or that person whose father died becomes a villain and they try to enact that same type of pain on society.
Right.
It's kind of one or the other. And we see this, it's such a pattern that people started using in literature, and it's really impactful all the way up to today when it's in movies. Every time you see a superhero story, it starts with loss, some sort of loss.
Yes.
They have to come from something, and they have to choose to be better than that loss. Whereas the villains in history, in real life, chose to inflict that same pain on society.
Yes.
Instead of overcoming it and preventing that pain from happening again. So it's to me, it's a really interesting simile to what's portrayed in art. And it's fascinating that we all feel the impact of that hero's story whenever we see it. So, but I love that research.
Yeah.
I think it confirms a lot about the way we feel about art in movies.
Wow. So interesting. Yeah. So that's our first villain that we're going to be going over. I found it just very interesting. I had no idea that many people were killed under his rule. Fascinating that he wasn't just like, that he was the successor or the prince of something. He pretty much was a self-made, horrible person.
Dang.
Yeah, that just took out, And I could have gone into more details. He was just horribly violent, and his armies were taught to be violent as well.
Totally. But the takeaway is
We need dads.
we need dads. And if you see somebody who needs one, maybe step in as like a mentor.
Yeah.
It'd be very helpful.
Yeah. So we don't end up with more of these guys.
Yeah. Great job, babe.
Thank you, babe.